everybody, and welcome back. Today, we are going to be talking about the definitive way to fingerpick on the guitar. Now, this is not as easy to explain as how to hold a pick or how to strum a guitar, because fingerpicking is something that has multiple techniques based on genre. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what the technical correct classical fingerpicking looks like, and then variations on that, and how the principles that we learn in that classical fingerpicking technique can apply to our other styles, be it jazz, blues, rock, funk, whatever. So let's go ahead and dive into our classical guitar. First things first, when it comes to classical guitar, your posture is everything, and how you sit has a lot to do with how your hand will look while you're fingerpicking. So, the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're able to sit on the edge of our seat with our back upright, nice sitting up straight. And for our right-handed players, we have our left leg raised slightly. Many of you probably know they have little stools for this, but we want our left leg lifted up slightly. See if I can get this in view. We want to make it so that the waist of our guitar is resting on that raised leg, and therefore the bout of our guitar is in between our legs. This makes it so that our neck is kind of at like a nice acute angle with our body, right? We don't want a 90-degree angle. We want it to be upright like this. This makes it so that it's easiest for us to reach all the frets that we need to reach. And it makes it so that while we're fingerpicking, all we have to do is just gently rest our forearm on the edge of the guitar. The idea is that you should not feel like you have to fight your guitar to hold on to it. It should be resting comfortably so that your hands are free to move wherever they need to go. Now, like I said, we're going to want to rest our forearm on the edge of our guitar and make it so that our thumb can find the sixth string naturally at the rosette. We can rest that there, and as a general rule, when we start out, our thumb is responsible for our sixth string, our fifth string, and our fourth string, and then our three fingers here, we don't use our pinky, are responsible for our third string, second string, and first string. A quick side note, when we talk about classical picking, we use the letters P, I, M, and A to signify our four fingers that we use to pluck. So in music, you will often see a little P over things where they want you to use your thumb, or an I where they want you to use your index finger. Probably the most important thing to remember is that this is all done because of a classical tradition, which means that someone said it should be this way. They're dead now, but we still follow it, and that's going to influence how we do everything else and how we innovate as players. So looking again at our fingers, there's a couple of things that we want to make sure we have happen in our wrist and in our fingers. Number one, we want to make sure that there's an ever so slight bend to our wrist. It should almost feel like it's kind of dangling there. We don't want it to look like this, and we don't want it to look like this. In one of my other videos, I talk about the economy of motion and unnecessary tension, and how those are things that we should be constantly seeking to rectify in our playing. This is a prime example. Our wrist should feel relaxed. We never want it to feel like we're adding tension to make it do things or like that. We will play like this in some other cases, especially where we need to like palm mute and things like that while we finger pick. But for now, as we're talking about the classical tradition, we're just going to have a slight bend. The next thing, and this one definitely applies to our more modern techniques as well, is we want to make sure that our thumb is slightly to the side of these fingers. A lot of students will start picking like this, and what that means is that they end up picking into their other fingers. So when they pluck like that, they end up kind of running into all of their fingers, and it makes it really hard to be kind of fluid. So we want to make sure that we have our thumb and our fingers positioned in a way where we can pluck freely. We don't have to worry about them running into each other. The next thing is we want our fingers to stay relatively straight. They shouldn't be like this, but they also shouldn't be like this. And when we pluck, we don't want to pluck like this, because what that does is it makes the string slap, and that is a specific technique that you can do. However, what ends up happening is we end up having to constantly try to get our finger underneath the string in order to pluck it. Instead, what we want to do is we want to feel as though our fingers are essentially elongated picks, And this knuckle is where we're moving from. See how it kind of moves with that motion? Now there is going to be a little bit of bend that needs to occur so you don't run into the next string, but it should feel natural as opposed to a constant contracting and retracting in order to pluck the strings and then get back to them. Now that's the general idea for our hand positions. Quick review. We want our forearm to be resting on the side of the guitar. We want to make sure that our fingers are not plucking into each other, that they're all kind of cocked to the side. Our wrist has a nice gentle curve to it that feels natural, and that when we pluck, we're plucking across the string. The next thing to understand is that there are two different types of strokes that we use in classical guitar. We have the free stroke and the rest stroke. With the rest stroke, we take our string, we pluck it, and then fall immediately to rest on the string above it. Obviously, we wouldn't necessarily do that a lot, but you could do it with all your fingers. And what it does is it provides a boomier, thuddier pluck than a rest stroke would. We can hear it really easily in the sixth string. Now these are the general rules, but if you remember back to the clip at the beginning of the video, I broke all of these rules. There were times where I was doing free strokes. There were times where I was doing rest strokes. And there were times where, even though I've said that we should be keeping these three fingers attached to certain strings, I switched. Because it's what I wanted to do and what I felt like needed to be done. There are times where classical music will tell us what to do and other times where it won't, but that's neither here nor there. These are general guidelines that, as I said, will influence how we play a steel string or an electric. So now that we have that foundation under our belts, let's look at how we can vary it in different styles. Now we've transitioned over to a steel string guitar. And this is what most of us are probably familiar with when we're trying to learn a fingerpicking song, whether that's Dust in the Wind or Landslide or Stairway to Heaven or you name it. There are so many acoustic guitar songs where we're fingerpicking. The biggest thing is that most of the time when we are fingerpicking on an acoustic guitar, specifically with classic rock songs, we find ourselves doing free strokes. We just never really knew that's what they were called. Now, if you'll notice, our guidelines still applied. Our index and our middle finger were attached to our third and our second string, respectively, and our thumb was alternating between these two, which are well within its chosen role. This is not always the case, but again, it's where we see that the influence of classical music is pushing through into popular music. You'll also notice that the hand is very relaxed. It's playing, but not really bent or moved any which way that makes it too difficult, and we are plucking our fingers and holding them in a way where we're not running into each other. This is where we get into things getting a little hairy though, because even in the music video for Dust in the Wind, you can see one of the guitarists is playing with his wrist against the bridge of the guitar, and he's plucking with his fingers moving like this. Guitar is such a unique instrument in that we're still in the development of the guitar. It hasn't been around for hundreds and hundreds of years for us to build up exactly what its technique should look like. And because of that, most people who learn guitar are self-taught, and therefore they don't necessarily know all of these rules, which is why it's so difficult to teach these rules. Because if you were to play it exactly like the guy from Kansas, you would have to play technically incorrectly. So, as a general rule, and this goes for pretty much all of music, there are no rules. Do what works, do what makes sense, but understand and hearken back to where it came from and why we do it a certain way. In essence, know what rule you're going to break before you break it. Now, there are some instances where we desire to have a sort of bass or oompa effect going on, something that sounds like this. Again, we see that I'm breaking the rules I just told you about. But the reason why is because we need to be able to palm mute those notes up here so that we can really hear that. As opposed to. This is again where we're breaking this tradition for specific styles. Another technique that breaks this tradition has been around for quite a few years, but became really, really popular in the early 2000s. A lot of people call it the John Mayer strum, where you get these chucks and things in there, but it looks like this. Again, we see the wrist is definitely broken down, and we're using the back of our nails to chuck the strings. As you can see, the world of fingerpicking gets really muddy really fast, so there's only one other thing that I want to talk to you about, and that is nails. I grow my nails out because I like the way it sounds, and there are a lot of people that do like the way it sounds. What you pick with, both when you're using an actual pick and when you're using your fingers, is a huge part of your identity as a guitarist. I was blessed with very thick nails, and so for me, I like the way that it sounds when I pluck guitar. There are some people who aren't able to grow thick nails, and there are some people who prefer to have that sound that comes from the pad of your fingers. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Find out what works for you and do that. It's the same rule as always. You'll also notice that as I was playing, there were times, especially in the free stroke section, where I was using my thumbnail. But there were also times, like when we were doing the palm muting, where I was using the side of my nail. That's because A, it's easier to do while palm muting, and B, it sounds better for that style. Take this as it is, a tool that you can use, you can bend, you can mold, but again, if you're going to break the rule, know what rule you're breaking first. So what do you think about all of this? Is there a specific artist that you try to emulate when fingerpicking? Do you like to grow your nails out, or don't you? Let me know down in the comments. As always, please like and subscribe. It does help out the channel and it makes my day better. Even if you don't make my day better though, please go make someone else's day better. My name is Mac Wright. Thank you so much. We'll see you around.